10 years after I married Julian, he named my older sister his empress. Then he ordered me to host a parasitic poison worm, to feed it with my own body, all to cure her of a poison. Alara, it's just a sorrow-eater poison. It will make you forget all your troubles. Isn't that a good thing? It sounded wonderful. I swallowed the worm right in front of him and, just as he wished, I began to forget. I forgot how he'd demoted me from his wife to a mere consort. I forgot the bowl of medicine he'd forced on me to make me lose our child. I forgot that I once loved him more than life itself. Later, I would ask my handmaiden, confused. His Majesty is so strange. I smiled at him. So why is he crying? I always thought Julian and I were in love. In the 10 years we were married, I was with him every step of the way, from a deposed crown prince to the most powerful man in the land. Countless nights he would hold my hand, breathing heavily beside me. Alara, he'd whisper, "Thank God for you." That was, until the imperial edict for the new empress came out, and my name wasn't on it. Victoria. Ignoring the protests of his entire court, he insisted on making the Duke of Shu's widow, my own sister, his empress. Alara, she's your sister after all. We can't let her feel slighted. If she isn't the empress, would you have her kneel to you every day? He looked at me then, his expression matter of fact. Just like it was now. Alara, she's your sister. Are you really going to stand by and watch her die? The boy whose heart was once filled with only me had, somewhere along the way, replaced me with someone else. When Victoria wanted the throne, he handed it to her. When Victoria was poisoned, he didn't hesitate to order me to become a human vessel for the cure. To feed a poison with one's body. The words were easy to say, but it meant the host would have their flesh and blood devoured by the worm for 7 days and 7 nights. Only then could a single bowl of blood be drawn to cure any poison. I stared at Julian, a lump in my throat so tight I couldn't speak. Didn't he know? Of course he knew. He was the one who went to great lengths to find the shaman who could do this. But even knowing the agony I would face, he was determined. He needed me to raise that poison worm. Because I was Victoria's only sister. My blood would be most effective in her body. Alara, it's just a sorrow-eater poison. Julian softened his tone, kneeling down to take my hands, his eyes full of warmth. It will hurt for a little while, but then you'll forget all your troubles. Isn't that a good thing? I swallowed the metallic taste in my mouth and forced a smile. Yes. It's all I could ever ask for. That evening, Victoria sent for me, just as Julian wanted. When we met, she didn't have to kneel to me. Instead, I knelt to her. I was prostrate on the floor while Victoria lounged on a divan. I hear, little sister, that you've agreed to feed the poison to cure me? After 3 months in the palace, Victoria was glowing, her skin fair and rosy. She didn't wait for my answer, just smiled brightly. You're working so hard, sister. Mrs. Lee, bring out that fertility statue His Majesty got for me and give it to my sister as a reward. She paused. Oh, I almost forgot. With your body now, I'm afraid even a real god couldn't help you. She let out a little laugh, and her ladies-in-waiting giggled along with her. See? This was my beloved sister. Our father adored her. He was convinced I was bad luck because she fell gravely ill the day I was born. So he banished me to a country estate. Our mother pitied her. The marriage pact was originally between her and Julian. But when Julian was deposed, she refused to marry him. So my mother brought me back from the estate to marry him in her place. And now even Julian loved her. What's so funny? Speak of the devil. Julian strode into the hall. The laughter died instantly. I kept my head down. They were laughing at me, this barren hen who will never lay an egg. Julian's face went cold. Insolence. The ladies-in-waiting dropped to their knees. Who told Consort Alara to kneel? I've said before that she doesn't even have to kneel before me. Who gave you the audacity? My love, Victoria cooed, rising gracefully. She tugged on Julian's sleeve. Why are you being so fierce? She added, you're scaring the baby in my belly. My eyelashes trembled. I looked up. Victoria was pouting, poisoning Julian's hand to her stomach. He touched her belly, a look of careful wonder on his face. He felt my gaze and glanced at me. His lips moved, but he said nothing. Then he looked away. No wonder Julian was in such a hurry. Victoria had been poisoned back when she was living. The poison wasn't fatal, but it made it difficult for her to conceive. And even if she did, she was prone to miscarriage. She'd only been in the palace for 3 months, and she was already carrying Julian's child. How many months along was she? They must have been together long before this. It made sense. I grew up on a remote estate. The one who was truly Julian's childhood sweetheart was always Victoria. I wandered aimlessly through the imperial garden, my hand drifting to my own stomach. I'd had a child once too, but at 6 months, Julian gave me a bowl of medicine and made me lose it. He'd held me then, kissing me over and over. Alara, if I don't use her to get my father's attention, he'll forget about me completely. I can live my whole life as a deposed prince, but how could I bear to watch you suffer with me? Alara, don't be afraid. You are my wife. In the future, we'll have so many more children. But now someone else was his wife. And someone else would be the one to have many children with him. When I returned to my residence, the Palace of Morning Dew, my handmaiden Lily gasped. My lady, did the Empress torment you again? I shook my head. I just wasn't used to it. I wasn't used to my entire world changing in just a few short months. I just needed to sleep. Everything would be better after I slept. I bathed and changed, but as I slept, I dreamed of the past. Julian and I went back much further than 10 years. I met him once when I was 10. He had lost his jade pendant and was searching for it frantically. I was the one who found it and returned it to him. After he returned to the capital, he wrote me a letter to thank me. We corresponded for 5 years after that. The year I came of age, we confessed our love for each other. That's why I never imagined he could truly be in love with Victoria. And why, on our wedding night, I was so overjoyed to see the jade pendant on him from under my veil. I dreamed of how I tossed aside my modesty and eagerly lifted my veil. The young man stood there in his red wedding robes, his eyes filled with undispoisonized awe. He was stunned for a long moment, then smiled, bowing with a flourish. My apologies, dear wife. I've kept you waiting. He told me then that no matter what he became, a prince or an emperor, he would always be my husband. Mine alone. But today, I heard Victoria call him my love. She said it so sweetly. A dense, sharp pain pricked at my heart. I opened my eyes to see Julian staring at me. He rarely came to my palace at night. Usually, he wouldn't be here for half an hour before Victoria summoned him away. Now he was watching me in the darkness, unblinking, just like all those years we shared a bed. Waking in the middle of the night to find only each other in our eyes. Having a nightmare? Julian pried open my tightly clenched fists. Victoria has always been spoiled. Don't be mad at her. So he was here to speak for Victoria. I pushed his hand away and turned my back to him. Giving me the cold shoulder? Julian's voice turned hard. Alara, you're not behaving. He grabbed the nape of my neck and kissed me. His familiar scent, so long absent it felt foreign, invaded my senses. I suddenly thought of how he might have just kissed Victoria the very same way. A wave of nausea hit me, and I shoved him away. Julian's expression turned ugly. Alara, you find me repulsive? He grabbed my wrist, about to force himself on me. Tears streamed down my face. Julian clicked his tompoison. Why is it that the better your life gets, the more you cry? He stopped, softening his tone as he gently wiped away my tears. He always knew how to handle me. He knew I'd been cast aside as a child, starved for affection. He knew he was the only warmth I'd ever known, and that I couldn't easily leave him. He knew I loved him with my entire being. All it took was a little tenderness, and I was powerless against him. You heard today. Victoria is pregnant. You've always been the kindest person I know. Could you really bear to see that child lost? I've confirmed it with the shaman again and again. Hosting the poison will only cause some physical pain, it won't do any lasting harm. That worm will even ease your sorrows. Maybe then you won't be so prone to crying. Julian smiled and tapped my nose. He spoke as if it were a trivial matter. My throat felt heavy again, like it was filled with lead, and I couldn't make a sound. Your Majesty, the Empress has a terrible headache. She requests your presence. There it was. Right on cue. This time, Julian didn't leave in a hurry like before. He glanced outside, then pulled me into his arms, gently stroking my hair. Alara, once you've cured Victoria, Once you've forgotten all the unhappy things from the past, we'll start over. Start over? Your Majesty. The servant outside called again more urgently. Julian let me go and turned to leave. Your Majesty, I called out, stopping him. When can the shaman prepare the sorrow eater poison? Julian turned back. The poison is already in the capital. Then tomorrow morning. I looked at him, at the young man who was once etched into my very soul. Tomorrow morning, please have the shaman come to the palace. I didn't know if the sorrow eater poison would give Julian and me a new beginning. I had no choice. My parents, my husband, they all wanted me to cure Victoria. The next day, my palace of morning dew was busier than it had ever been. My father, the Prime Minister, my titled mother, my husband, the Emperor, and my sister, the Empress. A happy family reunion. For people, for pairs of eyes, all smiling as they watched me. Watching as the tea, with the poison worm inside, was brought before me. I stared at the black, spider-like insect at the bottom of the cup, my fists clenched. I'm terrified of insects. Years ago, a cruel servant on the estate retaliated after I told my mother about her mistreatment. She snuck into my room at night and filled my bed with bugs. Alara, Julian said, his voice carrying a hint of a warning. I bit my lip until I tasted blood, then picked up the cup and drank it in one go. My father immediately burst into laughter. The Empress is truly blessed by the heavens. I wish Your Majesty and Her Highness a healthy and happy birth. My mother rushed to Victoria's side. That filthy thing. Did it frighten you, Your Highness? Victoria feigned a helpless sigh. Father, mother, you should be more concerned about my sister. Sister, let me help you to your chambers to rest. She supported me with a look of deep concern. But as she turned, she whispered in my ear with a low laugh. Even a pearl hidden in dust will one day reveal its light. You foolish girl, did you really think the Crown Prince had all that free time back then to exchange heartfelt letters with you? Even a pearl hidden in dust will one day reveal its light. That's what Julian wrote to me back then. My lady is like a pearl hidden in dust, her worth unseen. But one day, her time will come. He said I was a pearl covered in dust. He said I was wonderful. He said I was worthy of love. His words were like a ray of moonlight, shining into the darkness of my life. But how did Victoria know about them? I didn't have time to think. The moment the poison entered my body, it began to gnaw at my flesh and bones. I lay on the bed, my body trembling, but I clenched my teeth, determined not to make a sound. They would laugh at me. I had married Julian when he was at his lowest, entered the palace as a crown princess, only to end up as a mere consort Alara. They were already laughing their heads off. If they found out Julian had turned me into a human cauldron for his empress, I would become the laughingstock of the city all over again. I curled into a ball, just like I did as a child when I desperately wanted someone to hold me, but no one ever came. I felt like I was drenched in sweat, again and again. As I drowned in the suffocating pain, my mind was flooded with humiliating, painful memories. The cold estate, the servants who looked down on me, my mother's harsh words. They mistreated you? You're the daughter of the Prime Minister. Why would they mistreat you? Have you ever stopped to think about what you did wrong? Was it your behavior? Your words? My silent, indifferent father. My sister, with her honeyed words and hidden daggers. You're so beautiful, little sister. The country air must be good for you. You don't resent father and mother for never visiting, do you? The grand coronation of the Empress. My husband, my sister. She's truly worthy of being the Empress His Majesty defied the court to appoint. So much more dignified than that foxy second daughter. What's the use of 10 years of his favor? 10 years and no children. His Majesty is merciful for not divorcing her. A tearing pain in my lower body, and the faint cry of a baby. Oh, what a beautiful little princess. Who could have given the lady that medicine? What a sin. No. It wasn't like that. My life wasn't so wretched. Julian wasn't like that. He'd never set foot in a kitchen, but he learned to make longevity noodles for me. He cared so much about his pride, yet he borrowed money from everyone to buy me a birthday gift. He was supposed to be keeping a low profile, but he got into a street brawl just because someone said a few bad words about me. He refused the beautiful women his father sent to the East Palace 3 times. He doted on me alone. He would always hold me and say, "Ilara, everything will be all right. One day, you will be the most honored woman in the world. I will lay all the world's treasures at your feet." He wrote me so many letters. It was because of his constant letters that the servants on the estate finally stopped bullying me. He said I was his most precious pearl. Even a pearl hidden in dust will one day reveal its light. But how did Victoria know? Was it a game they played together, a joke at my expense? Was it all a lie? I snapped my eyes open, the pain a sharp blade piercing every corner of my body. I scrambled out of bed. "Julian? Julian?" Lily rushed in. "My lady, what is it?" "His Majesty? Where is His Majesty?" I'm in pain." Tears streamed down my face. It hurt so much. The poison felt like it was trying to burrow into the deepest part of my heart, to devour it completely. "My lady, His Majesty is. He's at the Empress's palace right now," Lily sobbed. Boom. I collapsed onto the floor. It felt like something inside me had shattered. A mouthful of blood followed. It was a lie. It was all a lie. The pearl, the love, the marriage, all of it. "My lady, I'll go find His Majesty right now." I lay on the cold floor, staring at the serene moonlight outside my window. After the searing pain, a strange, tingling numbness was all that remained. The memories that had tortured me began to fade, growing distant. Then they reformed in my mind. They looked the same, but something was different. I don't know how long I lay there. Two phrases repeated in my mind over and over. From love comes anger, from love comes hate, from love comes obsession, from love comes longing. No anger, no hate, no obsession, no longing. And so no love. I picked myself up from the floor. From outside, I heard Lily's joyful cry. "My lady, His Majesty is here. He's here." Victoria and Julian arrived together. The moment she entered, she rushed in with red-rimmed eyes. "Oh, my dear sister, you've suffered so much." But when she saw me standing there, perfectly fine, she froze. Julian followed her in, and was equally stunned to see me. "My love, you were right. A little pain like that is nothing for my sister," Victoria said, turning and snuggling into Julian's embrace. I tilted my head. Strange. My reaction felt wrong. Victoria was calling Julian my love. I should have been upset. But right now, my heart was as calm as a still lake. "But sister, why did you smash everything in your room? That piece of jade. Isn't that the one His Majesty wore when he was crown prince?" I looked around the room. Fragments of memory returned. I was in agony. Day and night, it was constant pain. Eventually, I couldn't bear it anymore and started smashing everything in sight. The jade was indeed Julian's. It was our token of love, something I had always treasured. Now it lay on the floor in pieces. Julian frowned, clearly displeased. "If you're fine, then what is all this madness?" His gaze fell to my feet, and his frown deepened. "You're not even wearing shoes. Are you trying to get yourself hurt?" He started to walk toward me. "Ah!" Victoria cried out, her eyes welling with tears. "Your Majesty!" She had deliberately stepped on a shard of broken porcelain. "Victoria!" Julian turned and swept her into his arms. "Ilara, you are being utterly unreasonable." He shot me a furious glare. "Summon the imperial physician." I watched silently as he rushed away. I watched silently as Victoria shot me a triumphant smirk. I touched my chest. Strange. I felt nothing at all. The world seemed different. Or rather, I was different. I used to hate leaving the Palace of Morning Dew. Every plant, every stone in the palace reminded me that I had been demoted from wife to consort. It reminded me that Julian might have once walked these paths hand in hand with Victoria. But now, the flowers in the imperial garden were so vibrant. The water in the lake was so green. The spring day was beautiful. Why shouldn't I go for a walk? I used to feel a dull ache in my chest whenever I heard news from the Empress's palace. His Majesty has gifted the Empress again. His Majesty and the Empress played music together all night. His Majesty missed the morning court session for the Empress again. But now, what happened in the Empress's palace had nothing to do with me. Even when I thought about my past with Julian, my heart remained calm. The fluttering excitement, the heart-wrenching pain. It was all gone. I discovered that the world was clearer and brighter than ever before. My mind was sharper, more lucid than I could ever remember. So when Julian's attendant came to tell me to prepare for the shaman to draw my blood, my first thought was, why? Why should my blood be used to cure someone else? Giving blood hurts. I didn't want to. I ordered Lily to have the servants bar the doors to my palace. The shaman and his entourage were left standing outside. Though I had fallen from favor, I was still one of only 2 women in the emperor's harem. As long as the doors were closed, no one dared to force their way in. Soon, I heard Julian's furious voice from outside. Alara, what in the world do you think you're doing? Julian rarely got angry. At least, not with me. Because I always put him first. Whatever he said, I did. Even if I was unhappy, a few soft words from him were enough to soothe me. This time, he was probably furious because success was within his grasp, and I was backing out at the last minute. He stormed in, his face a dark mask, while I was doing my embroidery. Alara, what is the meaning of this? Victoria is already 4 months along. Every day we delay is another day of risk. In the palace for 3 months, but 4 months pregnant. He had some nerve saying that out loud. I didn't look up. I know you're upset that I didn't visit you during those 7 days. But I was busy with matters of state, and the Empress's pregnancy was unstable. You've always been so understanding. This time you've gone too far. I continued to stitch. Besides, did I lie to you? Are you not perfectly unharmed? I pulled a long thread. Alara. His old trick. His voice turned gentle. Be a good girl and come with me, I checked my heart. Nothing. It was just as calm as when I first saw his face. Your Majesty, I said, looking at the pattern on my embroidery hoop. I will come. When it's time for the Empress's funeral. Insolence. Julian roared. Outside, there was the sharp, coordinated sound of swords being drawn from their sheaths. He had brought the imperial poisonard. He had surrounded my palace. My mind worked with cold logic. I was outnumbered. A direct confrontation was unwinnable. Alara, let's go. I put down my embroidery and stood up. Alara. Julian suddenly grabbed my wrist. Turn around. Look at me. I looked at Julian. I studied him more closely than when he first walked in. From his brow to his eyes, from his eyes to his lips. And I felt, even more clearly than before, the utter stillness in my heart. A rare flicker of panic crossed Julian's face. His grip on my wrist tightened. Alara, Your Majesty, the Empress is in the Phoenix Palace. Her stomach pains are unbearable. Julian quickly composed himself. Before the messenger could finish, he was dragging me by the arm toward the Empress's palace. Of course, Victoria wasn't in unbearable pain. It was just one of her usual tricks. When she saw me, her eyes held that familiar, triumphant glint. She had won. The poison had been in her for 10 years, given to her by one of the Duke of Shu's foreign concubines on the very day she married him. It was so insidious that no one had ever found a cure. And now, my blood was going to save her. But looking at her, I felt the same as when I looked at Julian. Nothing. I remained perfectly calm. Even as the dagger sliced my wrist and the blood began to flow. Not only was the emotional pain gone, but the physical pain had vanished as well. I deliberately twisted my wrist. Truly, I felt nothing. It was Julian who let out a choked cry, Alara. Twisting my wrist wouldn't affect the blood's efficacy. What was he so nervous about? My disdain must have been written all over my face, because as I was leaving, Julian blocked my path again. Alara, what is wrong with you? He looked agitated. I'm happy, I replied. I've finally fulfilled my purpose. I can retire with my duty done. I know you feel wronged. I promised you after this, Your Majesty should stay in the Empress's palace and live in perfect harmony with her. There's no need to come to my palace anymore. Alara. Julian's face turned to ice. There's a limit to your tantrums. I'm not throwing a tantrum. I was telling the truth. Your Majesty, I don't want to see you in my palace again. Although I felt nothing for him, not even dislike. I had no desire to be surrounded by imperial poisonards, ready to force me to do things against my will at any moment. Fine. Just fine. Julian laughed through gritted teeth. Alara, don't you come crying to me. He stormed off. I sort of understood Julian's anger. For all those years, I had never once defied him. Even when he forced that medicine on me, all I did was cry and beg. I'm not afraid of suffering with you. I don't want some noble title. I just want to be an ordinary husband and wife with you. My love, please think about it again. Just think. She's already 6 months old. Now it was just a bowl of blood. Why was I throwing a fit? I could also understand why he felt so entitled to make me host the poison. I was the woman who would take a knife for him. The year he was about to be reinstated, his enemies in the court grew desperate. Several groups of assassins came for him at once. Without a second thought, I jumped in front of him and took the blow. The gash ran from my shoulder blade to my lower back, so deep you could see bone. I had to lie on my stomach for 2 months to recover. I never once cried out in pain then. So what were 7 days and nights of a poison worm's bites? What I didn't understand was myself. Why did I have to love a man so much I would throw my life away for him? Those memories no longer stirred anything inside me. I had no way of knowing. But it didn't matter anymore. Julian really did stay away from the palace of Morning Dew. He went to the Empress's palace every single day. He made grand gestures, as if he wanted the whole world to know how much he doted on the Empress. Lily was always muttering about it in my ear. It went in one ear and out the other. I didn't remember much of it. In fact, it wasn't just what Lily said that I couldn't remember. I found that many things from my past were becoming blurry if I didn't actively think about them. They were like a fallen leaf or a blade of grass I'd passed on the road. Who would bother to remember the exact shape of something so insignificant? But as the days went by, one thing became pressing. I was tired of the flowers in the Imperial Garden. I was tired of the water in the lake. I couldn't stand being in this palace anymore. One sunny afternoon, I stopped my father on his way back from visiting Victoria. The sorrow eater poison was truly a wonderful thing. When I faced my father, I felt no emotion at all. Not even when I told him what I planned to do and he shouted that I was insane. I just watched him calmly. Father, when you married my sister to the Duke of Shu, you were choosing his side, weren't you? The deposed prince and I. We were your disposable pawns. When the prince was deposed, you. Be quiet. My father's face was as pale as paper. I tilted my head. So, Father, will you help me? He was just like the old me. He had no choice. I used to crave their love. Why didn't they like me? What was I doing wrong? If I was just a little more obedient, a little more compliant, would they love me more? So even though I had leverage against them, I never used it. I didn't think that way anymore. I didn't need anyone else's love. I needed to love myself. My father didn't disappoint me. He quickly arranged everything. On the night of the Midsummer Festival, there would be a banquet. A fire would be set in my palace. Consort Alara would die in the flames, and I would slip out of the palace in the chaos. The thought of leaving these high walls filled me with joy. So much so that bumping into Julian and Victoria in the Imperial Garden didn't dampen my spirits at all. The lotuses were in full bloom. The two of them were admiring the flowers from a pavilion. Victoria was already 6 months pregnant. She clearly didn't want to see me. So I gave them a distant curtsy and turned to leave. But just as I turned, I heard Victoria let out a soft cry. I looked back to see Julian cupping her chin and kissing her. I stared at them, confused. If they wanted to kiss, couldn't they find a private room? It was broad daylight, and the ladies in waiting were so embarrassed they couldn't even look up. I clucked my tompoison twice and turned again. I'd only taken a few steps when I heard the sound of shattering porcelain from behind me. Julian had smashed his teacup. I must have offended Julian. He suddenly demoted me. From Consort Alara to Lady Alara, a lower rank. See? That's what happens when you expect someone to love you. He wasn't always generous when he wanted to give, but he was swift and decisive when he wanted to take away. I didn't care. Being demoted was even better. At the Midsummer Festival banquet, I wouldn't even have to sit next to him. I waited calmly for the festival. Victoria came to see me once. She mocked me, saying my favor was gone, and now even my rank was gone. I ignored her. She watched me for a long time, a puzzled look on her face, then sneered. You've learned a few tricks, little sister. Playing hard to get now. I'm afraid His Majesty won't fall for it. She left with her chin held high. Julian came by twice. Both times, he just stood at the door for a moment before leaving. It suited me just fine. Before the festival, I met with my father one last time to make sure everything was ready. But that night, something went wrong. And it was something I never could have expected. According to protocol, a lady of my rank was supposed to sit in the lower seats. But Julian's attendant still led me to his side. The seat he'd saved for me was even above Victoria's. Victoria looked like she wanted to kill me with her eyes. The officials below were all shaking their heads. Julian pulled me down into the seat. "Are you satisfied now?" I didn't understand what he meant by that, so I didn't answer. He slammed his wine cup down. "Alara, how long are you going to keep this up?" I was even more confused. When have I been keeping anything up? He wanted me to host the poison, I did it. He wanted my blood, I gave it. Now Victoria's belly was round and full. Healthier than any normal pregnant woman's. "I'm always the one comforting you. Can't you comfort me for once?" That's when everything changed. Tonight was the first court banquet since Julian's ascension, and many poisonous were present. People had just taken their seats, and the wine hadn't even been fully served. A maid in a palace uniform walked past the main table, and suddenly drew a long sword from her waist. Without warning, she lunged at Julian. Instantly, more maids and imperial poisonards drew their swords and blades. Screams erupted as chaos descended. My mind worked with cold logic. Assassins. Target Julian. This place is dangerous. Run. Julian dodged the first blow. I gathered my skirts and tried to flee. But he grabbed me and pulled me back. "Stay with me." I didn't want to stay with him. The assassins were after him. But Julian's grip was like iron, keeping me glued to his side. The real imperial poisonard moved swiftly, surrounding most of the assassins. But they were all dressed alike. An assassin in front of us spun around, his sword missing its intended target and coming straight for me. Almost without thinking, I twisted and pulled Julian, who was still holding on to me, in front of my body. I couldn't feel pain. But I could die. I didn't want to die. Let him die instead. As the blade pierced his chest, Julian looked at me in disbelief. His eyes, staring into mine, were filled with shock, with incredulity, and with a storm of something that looked like pain. As the sword was pulled out, that look shattered into a million pieces. Of course, I didn't escape the palace. With so many assassins and the emperor himself being stabbed, the palace was in utter chaos that night. My father's plan couldn't be carried out. And after that, I had no chance to escape. For some reason, Julian stopped going to the Empress's palace and moved into mine instead. And he wouldn't leave me alone. "I told you to look at me." Listen to him, roaring again. I raised my eyes and looked at him. "Not like that." He cried, his voice breaking. "Not like that, Alara. The way you look at me, it shouldn't be like this." "Then how should it be?" "You tell me, Your Majesty, and I'll do it." I was so tired. Julian's eyes were bloodshot as he shot to his feet. He grabbed my chin and kissed me desperately. I blinked. I thought, quite naturally, of that day in the garden when he and Victoria had kissed. But I felt nothing. No dispoisance, no nausea. I just wanted to sleep, so when he pushed me toward the bed, I lay down. I knew what he wanted. In 10 years of marriage, we had done this countless times. But I couldn't quite remember what it used to feel like. I stared at the swaying bed curtains. Was it always this boring? 1 cloud, 2 clouds, 3 clouds. As Julian moved, I seriously counted the embroidered clouds on the canopy. His wound hadn't healed yet. Blood trickled down his chest, dripping onto my body. Drip, drip. I kept counting the clouds. He was the one who chose to reopen his wound. It had nothing to do with me. Suddenly, Julian flew into a rage. He leaned down and bit my shoulder. His lips were now stained with blood. But I couldn't feel pain. I looked at him, confused. Why did he bite me? Julian broke down again. He held me tightly, his voice choked with sobs. "Alara, what's happened to you? How did you become like this?" He seemed to remember something. He froze, then scrambled away from me. Without even wiping the blood from his body, he threw on an outer robe and rushed outside. "Summon the shaman. Get me the shaman." Hiding behind a screen, I watched Julian point a sword at the kneeling shaman. "What did you give Alara?" Why has she become like this? He already had a severe face, but now, with his long hair unbound, his black robe open to reveal a bleeding chest, he looked terrifying. The shaman was white with fear, knocking his head on the floor. Your Majesty, what I gave the lady was, without a doubt, the Sorrow Eater poison. If it's a Sorrow Eater poison, why does she look at me like I'm a stranger? It must be. The shaman trailed off, then changed his tack. Your Majesty, the Sorrow Eater poison makes a person forget all their sorrows, and also the source of that sorrow. It must be that. He didn't dare finish, but Julian had already poisonous the rest. His face went deathly pale. Nonsense. If it was just a Sorrow Eater poison, how could she not even feel pain anymore? Your Majesty, has the lady ever experienced extreme physical pain? If so, the Sorrow Eater poison would indeed make her lose her sense of pain. Julian's face grew even whiter. I don't know if he was thinking of the child he'd made me lose, or the knife I'd taken for him. The hand holding the sword began to tremble uncontrollably. He pointed at the shaman like a demon. The antidote. Give it to me. Your Majesty, I told you before we administered it. Once the poison enters the body, it fuses with the flesh and blood. There is no going back. But if the poison feels that there is no more sorrow to consume in its host, the shaman knocked his head on the floor again. It will naturally leave to find a new host. Julian became a different person. He restored my rank of consort. The lavish gifts that used to go to the Empress's palace now started coming to mine. His wound healed, but he refused to leave my residence. He followed me around day and night. Alara, do you remember this? You embroidered it for me the first year we were married. I looked at the slightly worn pouch. I remember. What about this? That winter, the snow was so heavy. You wanted to make me a pair of rabbit fur gloves, but you couldn't bear to kill the rabbit, so you chased it all over the courtyard. I remember. And that year, Julian's eyes grew brighter as he spoke. That New Year's, we went to the mountains to pray together, praying for? I remember it all, I said, looking at him calmly. So what? The light in Julian's eyes dimmed. It's okay, Alara. He forced a smile. It's just the Sorrow Eater poison. Once the worm leaves you, you'll be fine. You'll get better. Alara, there are so many misunderstandings between us. Let me explain. Julian started talking about his recent coldness. He said he was just angry that I had smashed the jade pendant he'd given me. Angry that I had spoken to him so coldly. He had somehow found all the pieces of the pendant and glued them back together. Look, I did it myself. It's just like it was before, isn't it? I suspected there was something wrong with his eyes. It's ugly. Throw it away. It was just the truth, but Julian's eyes turned red. It's okay, it's okay. He went on, explaining Victoria's words about the pearl hidden in dust. He said she had just seen the letters I'd written to him back then. I always treasured those letters. I'd read them when I was tired. I never meant for her to see them. I nodded. Oh, and about making her empress. Julian took my hand. Alara, the Duke isn't dead. The kingdom isn't stable. Victoria's title as empress was just for show. Julian actually claimed that the child in Victoria's womb had nothing to do with him. The child was the Duke. The Duke had faked his death and escaped with his hidden army of loyal soldiers. The enemy was in the shadows, while he was in the open. By making Victoria the empress and protecting that child at all costs, he was trying to lure the Duke out. It's his only heir. He can't possibly ignore it. Even if he doesn't show himself now, the child will always be a weakness we can exploit. Besides, I was right, wasn't I? He couldn't wait and made his move at the Midsummer Festival. If this were the old me, I probably would have cried with joy hearing him explain all this. But now, I was just listening. Alara, once this is all over, I will depose Victoria. I promised you. I yawned. Your Majesty, I'm tired. You should discuss these matters of state with your advisors. I really was tired. I went into my bedroom, closed the door, and fell into a dreamless sleep. Whether Julian was telling the truth or not, I didn't care. To me, his words were as meaningful as knowing the leaves would turn yellow in the fall. And him following me around, saying things the old me might have loved to hear, was no different from the buzzing of a summer mosquito. I spent my days embroidering and sleeping. Time passed quickly. When autumn truly arrived, Victoria gave birth to a baby boy. Julian announced it to the entire kingdom with great fanfare. When the baby was a month old, he made another grand announcement. He was taking the Empress and the infant prince on the annual autumn hunt. I knew what he was planning, and he knew that I knew. But when I asked to go with them, he readily agreed. Alara, this is the final step. Trust me. The night before we left, I went to the Empress's palace. After the midsummer festival, the Empress's palace had been surrounded by the imperial poisonard. But these days, Julian treated me like a precious treasure, so no one stopped me. The baby looked a lot like Victoria. His personality is more like yours though, Victoria said, holding him. Her words were still laced with venom. Doesn't make a peep. Doesn't even cry when he's hungry. So stupid. I was about to leave. But then she added, don't blame your sister for always being against you. Julian married me to use me as a hostage. He shamed me and humiliated me. Why should I let you be happy? I lowered my eyes. I had no interest in our poisoning about it. She asked again, sister, are you really going to do this? It was the first time she had ever called me sister without a trace of mockery or scorn. So I looked up. Julian never touched me, Victoria said with a bitter laugh. Except for that one time in the pavilion. He only came running whenever I called, because he was afraid I'd do something to the baby. I looked at her, confused. Has my sister had a change of heart? One moment she was railing against Julian's cruelty, and the next she was defending him. Victoria clutched her stomach and burst out laughing. The sorrow eater poison. It's a truly wonderful thing. Her laughter turned to tears. Go. Just don't regret it later. I started to walk away. I hope you won't have any regrets either, sister. I sold Julian out. He was using Victoria and the baby as bait, giving the Duke of Shu a chance to kidnap them. The Duke knew it was a trap. If he came, he would have to bring all his forces. The autumn hunt would be a battle to the death. I told Victoria that I would help the Duke. Julian kept me by his side day and night. No one would know his plans better than me. Victoria asked me why. I told her plainly, because I need to run. Who wants to spend their days with a buzzing mosquito? But after the midsummer festival, the Duke's network of spies had been wiped out. And my father's contacts were among them. My father couldn't help me anymore. Everything went as I expected. Julian had no defenses against me. In fact, he was desperate to explain every last detail of his plan to me. And Victoria, as it turned out, had always been in contact with the Duke. She passed the information along. On the day of the hunt, Julian was in high spirits. Alara, wait for me to come back. He held me, looking just like the young man who once had eyes only for me. Of course. I'll wait for you. I answered him, sounding just like the devoted wife who once had a heart only for him. Just before he left, Julian turned back. Alara, smile for me. I paused. I put down my embroidery, looked at him, and curved my lips into a smile. He suddenly looked away. The hand holding his longbow trembled slightly. It's okay, he murmured again, more to himself than to me. He looked at me one last time. Wait for me. Then he lifted the tent flap and was gone. Of course, I wasn't going to wait for him. For all I knew, he might not even come back alive. The moment Julian left, I took Lily, and we drove away from the encampment in a single carriage. Years later, I would hear stories of that day, of how the forest was stained with blood. The Duke, long thought dead, had risen from the grave and ambushed the new emperor with hundreds of his elite poisonards. The new emperor's own troops were cut off, their lines of communication severed. He was trapped in a valley, where he fought for 3 days and 3 nights. During the battle, the empress was killed, and the 1-month-old prince died. The new emperor, mad with grief, flew into a rage. The Duke was cut down, his body left in pieces. But at that moment, I had no time to worry about the forest. 3 days was just enough time for Lily and me to escape the mountains. Another 3 days, and we were nearing the northern border. 3 more, and the border pass was in sight. Beyond the pass lay a neighboring country. Beyond the empire, there were 7 other nations, each with its own culture and customs. I could find a place I liked and live out the rest of my days freely, in my own way. We hadn't stopped for a single day. With our forged travel papers in hand, We were about to cross. But as the whip cracked, the sound of galloping hooves thundered behind us, followed by a sharp command. Halt! The thick smell of blood seeped through the carriage walls. The sky was growing dark, the wind heavy. I sat inside the carriage. Alara, get out. A familiar voice, thick with rage. Alara, get out now. Everything you did. I won't hold it against you. I stared at the shifting shadows outside the carriage curtain, but I didn't move. Alara, what else is there that you're not happy with? Julian's voice was almost a sob. Get out of the carriage. I'll explain everything. I've already killed the Duke of Shu myself. There's no one left to stand in our way. From now on There is no we. I cut him off. Your Majesty, I have no desire for a from now on with you. Impossible. Julian staggered, catching himself on the carriage shaft. Alara, it's my fault. It was all my fault, he said, his voice hoarse. Just be good and come back with me. You're just under the poison's control. You've forgotten. You've forgotten how much you love me. Julian took 2 more steps forward. The horse stamped nervously. He seemed to lose his footing and fell to the ground. Someone tried to help him up, but he yelled, get away. Alara, you've forgotten. You used to put me before everything. You'd stay up all night, your eyes red, just to sew clothes for me. You'd save every penny but still make me the most delicious food. You cared about me more than your own life. How could you not care if I live or die? How could you leave me? How could you? Your Majesty also said, that was the past. I interrupted him coolly. Julian, I don't love you anymore. Because I didn't love him. I could see things clearly. There was another thud against the carriage. The wind blew, lifting the curtain. It revealed the man behind it. Julian was missing an arm. He must have rushed here because he hadn't even had time to change his clothes. They were covered in dried blood, and his face was deathly pale. He was practically draped over the carriage frame. His eyes were bloodshot. And why are you putting on such a lovesick act? I met his gaze without flinching. Julian, you don't love me that much either. No. He cried out. Alara, there were so many things I had no choice about. We've come so far. You suffered so much with me. No choice. I watched him calmly. Julian, if it had been a boy, would you have been so quick to get rid of it? Julian froze, as if it took him a great effort to remember which child I was talking about. If it had been a boy, he would have been the imperial grandson. That's different. It's not different, I said flatly. You had plenty of other ways to solve your problems. But you chose the one that required sacrificing her, and sacrificing me. Just like with the Duke of Shu. You were already the emperor, and he was already defeated. If you wanted to eliminate him, you could have taken your time. But you chose the most extreme method. Because these methods were the fastest, and the cost to you was the smallest. Maybe you did care about me, but you also cared about your power, your status, your pride. Why did you insist on marrying Victoria, the woman who rejected you? You couldn't see through her little tricks to hurt me? Yet you played along. Why? Julian, of all the things you care about, I was the most insignificant. I used to be so confused. I didn't understand. He loved me. We had so many beautiful memories. We had walked through so much mud together. Why would he treat me like that? It was only by stepping outside the situation that I could see it clearly. Love. Perhaps he did love me. Just not that much. Julian, a love like that. I don't want it. Julian shook his head. No. It's not like that. Alara, it's not what you think. I do love you. He was actually crying. Tears streamed down his face, mixing with the dried blood. His hands beat against the carriage frame. You get out of the carriage, Alara. I'll explain. I was always going to marry you. I only played along with Victoria because the Duke had spies in the palace. Then let's find out. I stood up, pushed aside the curtain, and stood inches from him. I grabbed the horsewhip. Let's see just how much you love me. Julian, right now, I want to leave. Are you going to grant my wish? Or are you going to grant your own? Julian looked like he was about to collapse. He looked up at me, his hand trembling as he reached for me. You're filthy. His hand froze. A deep, soul-crushing despair flashed in his dark eyes. I didn't look at him again. I didn't care that he was leaning against the carriage. I raised the whip high. Giddy up. Years later, I would hear stories about that day. How the devoted new emperor, after fighting for 3 days, ignored his own grievous injuries and chased after the woman he loved for 7 sleepless days and nights. But her heart was made of stone. Everyone at the border that day saw it. The carriage leaving without a moment's hesitation. The man, already covered in wounds, nearly died on the spot. Even after his poignard saved him, his first instinct was to keep chasing. Until finally his strength gave out, and he collapsed in the dust. I never looked back. I don't know if those rumors are true or not. All I know is that the moment the carriage passed through the border gate, my heart felt like it had grown wings. After we crossed the river, Lily finally dared to peek out from the carriage. "My lady, where are we going?" She took the reins from me. I had her stop by a quiet lake. The sky was blue, the water clear. I took out the bamboo tube I carried with me and released the poison worm that had been waiting inside. "Go on. Find your next host." I wasn't afraid of it anymore. I had overcome something far more terrifying than any parasite. From then on, the world was wide and open. It was all mine. My freedom. The end.